The sun hung low over the rolling hills of Earth, casting long shadows across the fields where Rylan worked. His calloused hands gripped the handle of his hoe as he prepared the soil for planting. The rhythm of his work was soothing, a steady reminder of the simple life he had chosen. The world beyond his small farm had grown chaotic, with humans and aliens learning to coexist after decades of mistrust and curiosity. Rylan had heard of the Illyrians, beings from a distant star system who had made contact with Earth. They were elegant, with skin that shimmered like liquid silver and eyes that seemed to hold entire galaxies. Despite their beauty, they were distant. Their culture focused on logic and order, leaving little room for the messy emotions humans carried so openly. As he wiped the sweat from his brow, a shadow fell across his field. He turned to see a figure standing at the edge of his land. It was a woman, no, an Illyrian. Her slender frame seemed otherworldly, her silver skin catching the fading sunlight in a way that made her glow. "Excuse me," she said, her voice melodic but uncertain. "I appear to have lost my way." Rylan set down his hoe, brushing dirt from his hands. "You're a bit far from the main road. Are you looking for someone?" The Illyrian tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "I am here to observe human life. My name is Silva." Rylan nodded, trying to suppress the awe he felt in her presence. "I'm Rylan. This is my farm. Not much to see here, but you're welcome to rest if you need to." Silva stepped closer, her movements fluid and deliberate. "Humans are kind, yes? That is what I have heard." Rylan chuckled. "Well, we try. Can I get you some water?" She nodded, her gaze wandering across the fields. "Yes, water would be appreciated. I have not yet experienced it as humans do." Her words puzzled him, but he led her to the small well near his cabin. Drawing up a bucket, he poured the cool water into a tin cup and handed it to her. Silva took it with both hands, examining the simple object as if it were a rare artifact. She brought the cup to her lips, taking a tentative sip before her eyes widened slightly. "It's refreshing," she said, her tone almost reverent. "Is this why humans cherish water so deeply?" Rylan couldn't help but smile. "That, and the fact we can't survive without it." Silva's gaze fixed on him, her expression softening. "You speak plainly, yet there is warmth in your words. I find it pleasant." Rylan felt a faint blush creep up his neck. "Well, I don't get many visitors out here. Guess I'm not used to talking much." Silva set the cup down, her fingers lingering on its rim. "You live alone?" "Yeah. My parents left me the farm, and I've been here ever since. It's quiet, but I like it that way." Silva nodded, as if cataloging his words. "Quiet. Illyrians value quiet too, though ours is the silence of thought, not solitude." Her statement intrigued him, but he didn't press. Instead, he gestured toward the cabin. "You're welcome to stay for dinner if you want. I don't have much, but it's better than wandering around on an empty stomach." Silva hesitated, her gaze flickering toward the horizon. "Thank you. I will accept your offer." Inside the cabin, Silva moved with an almost unnatural grace, her presence making the modest space feel otherworldly. Rylan set about preparing a simple meal of roasted vegetables and bread. As he worked, he glanced at her, noticing how she examined every object with curiosity. "Do you not have things like this on your world?" he asked, breaking the silence. Silva looked up, her silver skin catching the warm glow of the lantern light. "Our lives are structured. Every item serves a purpose. There is little room for variety." Rylan placed a plate in front of her. "Well, here, variety's what makes life interesting. Go ahead, try it." She picked up a piece of bread, her fingers brushing against it as she did. The contact sent a strange jolt through Rylan, but he quickly brushed it off. Silva took a bite, her expression remaining neutral until a small smile broke through. "It is different," she said, "but enjoyable." Rylan grinned. "That's good to hear." As they ate, Silva asked questions about his life, his work, and his people. Her curiosity was unending, but her tone was never judgmental, only fascinated. "You speak of emotions as if they guide your actions," she observed. "Do they not make decisions more complicated?" Ryland shrugged. "Maybe, but they also make life worth living. Love, joy, even sadness. They're what keep us human." Silva tilted her head, her gaze thoughtful. "On my world, emotions are secondary to logic. Yet here, they seem to be celebrated." "They are," Ryland said. "It's what connects us to each other." Silva fell silent, her eyes fixed on the flame of the lantern. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. "I wish to understand this connection you speak of." Ryland's heart skipped a beat at her words. There was something in her tone, vulnerability, perhaps, that made him want to protect her, to show her the warmth she seemed to crave. "You'll figure it out," he said gently. "It just takes time." Silva looked at him, her gaze lingering. "Time. Yes, I think I would like that." As the evening stretched on, they sat in comfortable silence, the boundary between their worlds beginning to blur. The evening air was cool as Ryland walked Silva to the edge of his farm. The stars above shone brightly, their light reflected in her shimmering skin. She paused, her gaze fixed on the sky, her expression unreadable. "Does your world look like this at night?" Ryland asked, breaking the silence. Silva shook her head slowly. "Our sky is filled with auroras of shifting colors, but we lack the depth of stars your Earth has. It's beautiful in a way I did not expect." Ryland smiled, his hands tucked into his pockets. "It's easy to take it for granted when you see it every day. Guess that's why it's nice to have someone new around. Makes you appreciate things more." Silva turned to him, her expression softening. "You speak with such sincerity. I do not understand why your kind has earned a reputation for being unpredictable." He chuckled. "Well, we can be unpredictable, sure, but we're not all bad. Sometimes we just need someone to take a chance on us." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Perhaps you are right." They stood in silence for a moment, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. Silva seemed reluctant to leave, her gaze flickering between the horizon and Ryland. "Would it offend you if I returned tomorrow?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "Offend me? Not at all," Ryland replied quickly. "You're welcome any time. Might even have something new to show you." Her smile widened slightly, a rare expression that made her seem almost human. "Then I will see you again." She turned and began to walk away, her movements as fluid as water. Ryland watched her until she disappeared into the darkness, a strange feeling settling in his chest. The next day, as Ryland worked the fields, he found himself looking toward the edge of his property more often than he cared to admit. By late afternoon, he spotted her approaching, her silver skin gleaming in the sunlight. "You're back," he said, setting down his tools. Silva nodded. "You said you would show me something new?" He grinned. "I did, didn't I? Follow me." He led her to a small grove of trees near the river that bordered his farm. The air was cooler here, and the sound of flowing water filled the space. Silva's eyes widened as she took it all in. "This is peaceful," she said, her voice filled with wonder. Ryland pointed to a tree bearing ripe fruit. "This here's a wild plum tree. You probably don't have anything like it on your world." Silva reached out to touch the fruit, her fingers brushing against its smooth surface. "May I?" "Go ahead," Ryland said. She plucked a plum and bit into it cautiously. Her eyes lit up as the sweet juice filled her mouth. "It is unlike anything I have tasted before. Humans have such richness in their world." Ryland leaned against a tree, watching her with amusement. "You're like a kid seeing everything for the first time." She turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "Your world is so different from mine. On Ayler, everything is calculated, structured. Here, there is freedom, chaos, yes, but also beauty. Guess that's why you're here, huh?" To figure us out. Silva nodded. Yes, but now I find myself wanting to experience more than just observation. I want to understand what makes your kind so unique. Rylan felt a flicker of something. Pride, maybe, or a deeper connection he couldn't quite name. Well, you've come to the right place, he said. We've got plenty to show you. As the sun began to set, they walked back to the cabin, their conversation flowing easily. Silva asked more questions, her curiosity seemingly endless, and Rylan answered as best he could. When they reached the cabin, she hesitated at the door. May I stay longer tonight? Rylan opened the door wide. Stay as long as you like. Inside, the small space felt warmer with her presence. Rylan prepared another simple meal, and they ate together in companionable silence. After dinner, Silva stood by the window, looking out at the stars. Your people have a way of making even the smallest moments feel significant. I do not know how you do it. It's just who we are, Rylan said, joining her. She turned to him, her gaze searching his face. When you speak, I feel something, a connection perhaps. It is unfamiliar to me, but I find that I do not want it to end. Rylan's heart thudded in his chest. That's what we call a bond, Silva. It's rare, but when it happens, it's special. She tilted her head, considering his words. Special. I like that. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither fully understood. Rylan reached out, his hand brushing against hers. She didn't pull away. Do humans often form bonds like this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Not often, Rylan admitted. But when we do, it's worth holding on to. Silva's eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Then I will stay. I want to learn more of this bond. Rylan smiled, his voice gentle. I'd like that too. And as the stars watched over them, the distance between their worlds seemed to fade, replaced by something neither had expected, but both were willing to explore. Over the following days, Silva became a regular presence in Rylan's life. She arrived each morning as the sun crested the horizon and lingered long into the evening, her curiosity about her seemingly endless. Rylan found himself looking forward to her visits, her questions, and the way her face lit up with every new discovery. One afternoon, as they worked together in the field, Silva paused to wipe her brow, mimicking a gesture she'd seen Rylan do countless times. Her movements were precise, almost practiced, and he couldn't help but chuckle. You know, he said, leaning on his hoe, you're getting pretty good at blending in. If you weren't silver and glowing, I'd almost mistake you for a local. Silva arched an elegant brow. Is that a compliment or an observation? Bit of both, he replied, grinning. She tilted her head, studying him. Your humor is fascinating. It is a form of bonding, yes? Something like that, Rylan said. It's how we connect. Sometimes, laughter says things words can't. Silva considered this for a moment before attempting her own smile. It was small and uncertain, but Rylan could see she was trying. The effort warmed something deep inside him. By the time the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the fields in hues of gold, Silva leaned against a fence post, her gaze distant. Rylan, she said softly, there is something I wish to ask. He wiped his hands on a rag, turning to her. Go ahead. She hesitated, as if searching for the right words. Your species is physically expressive. I have observed the way humans interact. Their touches, their closeness. It intrigues me. Rylan felt heat creep up his neck. Yeah, we're a tactile bunch. It's how we show we care. Silva stepped closer, her luminous eyes locking onto his. Would it be inappropriate for me to experience this closeness? His throat went dry. Closeness? You mean like touch, she clarified, her voice steady but curious. To understand what it means, Rylan swallowed hard, his heart thudding in his chest. It's not inappropriate if both people are okay with it. Her gaze held his for a long moment. Then, slowly, She extended her hand. Rylan reached out, their fingers brushing. Her skin was smooth and cool, almost electric, and he felt a shiver run up his spine. Silva's eyes widened. Is this the reaction humans feel? It is pleasant. Yeah, Rylan managed, his voice a little hoarse. That's one way to describe it. She stepped even closer, her presence almost overwhelming. May I touch more? Rylan hesitated, his mind racing. This was uncharted territory. Her curiosity, her openness, it was all so disarming. But there was no malice in her gaze, only genuine curiosity. Okay, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Just tell me if it's too much. Silva nodded, her movements deliberate as she placed a hand on his chest. Her touch was light, but it sent a cascade of sensations through him. She tilted her head, watching his reaction closely. This is fascinating, she murmured. Your body responds to even the slightest contact. It is different from my kind. Rylan struggled to keep his breathing even. Guess that's part of being human. Silva's fingers traced the fabric of his shirt, her curiosity evident in every movement. Your heart is racing, she observed. Is this part of the bond you spoke of? Could be, Rylan admitted, his voice thick. Or it could just be you. She looked up at him, her expression softening. I do not wish to cause discomfort. You're not, he assured her, placing his hand over hers. It's just new. For both of us. Silva nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to their joined hands. I feel something too. It is warm, inviting. I do not understand it fully, but I wish to. Rylan's hand tightened slightly on hers. We've got time to figure it out. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the field. The air grew cooler, but neither of them moved, their connection anchoring them in the moment. Finally, Silva broke the silence. Rylan, I believe I understand why your species is so revered and feared. You are capable of such intensity, such depth. It is both beautiful and overwhelming. He smiled softly. Well, you're not so bad yourself, Silva. Guess we're more alike than we thought. Her lips curved into a faint smile, and for the first time, Rylan saw something in her eyes, trust, maybe even affection. As the stars began to fill the sky, they stood together, the distance between their worlds fading into insignificance. In that moment, they weren't human and alien, farmer and visitor. They were simply two souls navigating the uncharted terrain of connection. And for Rylan, that was more than enough. The following days passed in a rhythm that felt both strange and natural. Silva and Rylan spent hours together, often working side by side on the farm. Though her strength far surpassed his, she adapted to his pace, letting him teach her the intricacies of planting and tending to the crops. She was a quick learner, her questions revealing a keen intellect. But it was the moments in between, the shared laughter, the quiet exchanges, the subtle touches, that began to redefine their connection. Rylan found himself looking forward to Silva's presence more than he wanted to admit, and the way her luminous eyes softened when she looked at him stirred something he hadn't felt in years. One evening, as they sat on the porch after a long day, Silva leaned back, gazing up at the stars. Her silver skin seemed to shimmer in the moonlight, and Rylan couldn't help but steal glances at her. Your world is peaceful, she said, breaking the comfortable silence. Depends on where you're standing, Rylan replied. Not everywhere is like this farm. Silva tilted her head. Why do you stay here then? Isolated, away from others of your kind. Rylan hesitated, then sighed. Because it's simple. I've had my fill of complicated. Out here, it's just me, the land, and the work. No politics, no drama. She regarded him thoughtfully. And yet, you welcome me, a stranger, from a world far removed from yours. Yeah, well, Rylan said, scratching the back of his neck, you didn't exactly give me much choice at first. Silva's lips quirked upward, her version of a smile. True, but you could have turned me away after that. Many humans would have. Maybe, Rylan admitted, but you're not like anyone I've ever met. And I guess I like having you around. Her gaze softened, and for a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Silva reached out, her fingers brushing against his arm. The gesture was light, tentative, but it sent a shiver through Rylan. You said humans use touch to express care, she said quietly. I am beginning to understand why. It bridges a gap between words. Rylan swallowed hard, his pulse quickening. It does. Sometimes it says more than words ever could. Silva moved closer, her silver skin catching the faint glow of the porch light. May I try something? Rylan nodded, unable to speak. She leaned in slowly, her movements deliberate. Her hand cupped his cheek, her cool skin a stark contrast to his warmth. The contact was electric, sending a surge of emotion through him. Your face tells a story, she murmured, studying him intently, of loss, of resilience. It is compelling. Rylan felt his throat tighten. Silva, Before he could finish, she tilted her head, her lips brushing against his. The kiss was feather-light, almost uncertain, but it ignited something deep within him. He hesitated for a heartbeat before leaning in, his hands finding her waist. The kiss deepened, their differences forgotten in the shared connection. Silva's hands explored his face, his shoulders, her curiosity evident in every touch. Rylan responded in kind, his fingers tracing the smooth planes of her back. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Silva's eyes glowed softly, her expression a mixture of wonder and something else, something tender. I did not expect this, she admitted, but it feels right. Rylan smiled, his thumb brushing against her cheek. Yeah, it does. For a long moment, they stayed like that, the silence filled with unspoken words. Then Silva rested her head against his shoulder, her body relaxing against his. Rylan, she said softly, your kind fascinates me, but you are more than fascination. His heart swelled at her words, and he tightened his arm around her. You're not so bad yourself, Silva. As the night deepened, they remained on the porch, their connection growing stronger with each passing moment. For the first time in years, Rylan felt like he wasn't alone, and that maybe, just maybe, there was something extraordinary about the simple life he'd chosen. Silva, too, seemed to find solace in the quiet moments they shared, her curiosity tempered by a newfound sense of belonging. Together, they began to navigate the uncharted territory of their relationship, each step bringing them closer to a bond that transcended their differences. And as the stars above bore silent witness,